This completely finished 1953 Buick Wildcat represented the height of the era of the concept car, but also helped bring about its end. What happened to GM's line of Motorama dream cars? Find out on One of a Kind now. Before World War II, Americans were satisfied with a sedan. It was classic, practical. It got you from point A to point B. But when thousands of GIs spent time in Europe, they noticed a new breed of automobiles. Some even got the chance to drive them. And once they got a taste of the two-seater coupe, it was hard to go back. This is the story of one of the first cars designed for the changing taste of the American driver. This is the story of a car built from the ground up to capture the attention of the CEO of General Motors. This is the story of the 1953 Buick Wildcat.
Before World War II, there were really no two-seater sports cars in the United States, but the GIs had seen, some had even driven, the two-seater sports cars, and they liked them. So when they came back, they started actually customizing cars and making two-seater sports cars. Harley Earl saw that. He said, you know, some of our concept cars have to be two-seaters, and this was one of them. It's a heck of an execution, I might say. The car really doesn't have a bad line on it, and you can view it from any angle, and all the proportions work.
After the war, concept cars like the Buick Wildcat established the standards to which Americans aspired. They were a taste of things to come, building demand years ahead of production.
Some of the interesting design cues on this car, of course, are the grille that proceeded either convexly or concavely, the headlight rims, and especially the portholes on the fenders were a Buick styling cue for years to come. There's a lot of little unique features on this car. The gas filler pipe is in the tail light. You just flip open the tail light and you fill it up. The push-button door handles. The sliding door handles were used on all the concept cars in the early 50s, and you can see that on the inside of this car. Tail fins on the car were starting to come in. You can see the first signs of tail fins on Buicks. Of course, Cadillac had the real exclusive on that. But the Dagmar bumpers in the front, this was probably the biggest example of that idea up to this time. And they're a good size. And of course, I think they were actually named after a famous actress. One of the state-of-the-art ideas for cars at that time was the signal-seeking radio. And this car not only has a signal-seeking radio, but the dial that signal seeks that shows you what station you're on is round. So the whole thing is unique in that sense. One of the things you'll notice about this car that's really unique, and it's the only time I've ever seen it on any car, is that there is a hood ornament on the front and an identical hood ornament on the back. Now, I've never seen that before.
The era of the concept car was marked by innovation, cutting-edge design, and a period of creativity unmatched in American automotive history. And the harder their designers worked, the harder they played.
Harley Earl put all of his talents into getting the right people behind him. Each division had its own studio and started designing cars that the people wanted. No longer did you have to settle for a car that looked like everything else. Now there was distinctive designs which were totally GM.
It's been said lately by many of us that Detroit at that time at design staff was Mad Men, only the Detroit issue. We were working long hours. We were playing as hard as we were working. Harley was a champion of that. Everybody that worked there was part of the team. And We bowled together, we lived together, we partied together, and it was just a pride of working there.
In the world of concept cars, design staff were often asked to work long hours, right up to the moment the car was set to be approved by the CEO.
Buick was the first vehicle out of the fold that had fins that was designed actually by Harley Earl. That was an all-night affair. Started at 6 one night, and at 6 in the morning we had a finished vehicle. Harlow Curtis showed up at 8 o'clock and bought the concept. Harley was there for the whole time. Went into his office about 4 o'clock, took a shower, changed clothes, and he was back, at 6 o'clock. And there we were, standing tall when Curtis came in, and the rest is history.
Most concept cars weren't finished before they left the floor. They didn't need to be because they were just for show. But this Buick Wildcat was completely finished before it drove off the design floor. Why? Find out right after this. This 1953 Buick Wildcat was the toast of the town when it was introduced as a concept car. But unlike many concept cars, which were only partially completed, this Buick was almost completely finished.
You have to keep in mind that when these concept cars were being made, a lot of time they had a short period of time to get it ready for a show. And sometimes they didn't complete the car. The 1956 Cadillac Eldorado Brougham, they didn't have time to get the engine in, so they put lead weights in the front and chained down the hood so nobody would know the car didn't have a motor. But this particular car, everything works, and everything is highly detailed. Even the trunk is highly detailed. The radio is working, it's a signal-seeking radio. So this car, among all the concept cars, is probably one of the most highly finished concept cars that exist. There's no car of the 50s that has a more highly detailed engine compartment than this car. The manifolds were all ground down, they were porcelainized, chrome was used all over. The engine compartment is just amazing.
The new owner restored the Buick Wildcat after purchasing it from a used car dealer, and he found it in surprisingly good shape.
All the parts of the car were here. The interior was here. There was plenty of samples of the original color. The only thing that we were missing was one of the rotor-static hubcaps, and we had to fashion a windshield for the car. So that was about it. Everything else was there. It had to be rebuilt, refinished, and it was probably one of the easier restorations for concept cars that we have.
Although this Buick Wildcat is fully functional, that doesn't mean it handles like a dream.
A lot of the cars that are concept cars drive in dramatically different ways. Some were not highly finished, so you have to be very delicate with them. This particular car, I'm very comfortable doing 35, 45, 50 miles an hour with it, and it drives just really like a regular Buick. The underpinnings of it, the chassis, the motor, the drivetrain, is all 1953. And, drives like a 53 Buick. And of course, the attachments of the body and everything, you're always a little concerned with. It's a fiberglass body, which, by the way, was the medium of the day. Your Corvette was fiberglass. All your concept cars from General Motors that were full concept cars, they were designs onto themselves. They weren't a production car where they sliced and diced it. They were fiberglass.
Motorama also spawned a whole host of other auto shows. It wasn't long before our competitors realized that we were stealing the show with our Motoramas and featuring our future products and giving people a glimpse of what was coming down the road. So it wasn't long after that that other auto shows started to pop up, international auto shows, which all vehicle manufacturers participated in.
This 1953 Buick Wildcat marks a golden age in concept cars, in which General Motors designers would create the car of the future with the resources of the world's greatest automaker. What happened to the concept car era, and why did it come to an end? We'll find out right after this. Presented to the public in 1953, this Wildcat inspired design cues on GM cars for the next decade. But the era of the concept car was rapidly drawing to a close.
We were giving too many styling cues and too many good ideas away to our competitors because in reality, Chrysler came out with a 4-headlight system 2 years before we did, and they took it directly from our show cars in New York. Management said, this is not good that we're doing all of this work and giving our styling ideas away to the competition.
It turns out this 1953 Buick Wildcat was too far ahead of its time. GM was tipping its cutting-edge designs to its competitors and locked down its design studios to only a select few. But this Wildcat represents the height of the concept car era, making it absolutely one of a kind.